If the Bible's got you tied in knots, if you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
You know it is. It is time for the Heretic Happy Hour, and we are so very glad you are here with us for this amazing episode. We are deep into our conspiracy theories series. Oh yeah, baby. All will be revealed in this episode. Hey, how you doing? So my name is Keith Giles. I'm one of 4 hosts here on the Heretic Happy Hour. I'm the author of several books, including the most recently released Jesus Unexpected, Ending the End Times to Become the Second Coming. And it's available now on Amazon. And I'm joined by Katie, Derek, and Matt. Say howdy.
Howdy, everyone. This is Katie. I am recording from an undisclosed location on this conspiracy theory podcast, and I'm the author of Sex, Slavery, and Self-Control, and looking forward to exploring all of these theories with my fellow unnamed co-host.
And this is Derek. I'm recording live from the mothership, P-Funk.
Oh, yeah.
Put a little slide in your glide, a little dip in your hip. I'm the author of Deconstructing Religion, and I'm a professional ass kicker.
I thought you were a professional asshole.
I decided to change it up a little bit.
Okay, good.
I love
good. I love it. And this would make me Matt DiStefano. And I want everyone right now to hit pause and I'll go over to my new podcast, Apostates Anonymous, because everyone shut up. I already covered what we're talking about today. So go listen to that show and you're welcome.
What the hell?
You covered it well. I found it very helpful prep.
Well, good. I'm glad I got one listener. Great.
I'll endorse this. Yes.
All right.
And pretty soon, me and Katie Valentine, we're going to break off and do our own shit because just because
it's the mothership bunker locations.
That's right.
Have fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Live.
I'm just kidding. Keep listening to this show because it's better than mine.
Yeah, it is. We know that.
Oh, shut up.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Derek, do we have a hotline for you to announce?
Yeah, you absolutely know we do, man. And listen, if you guys want to get in touch with us, want to leave us a message or just, shout out, you can do that by exercising finger dexterity and dialing 240-343-7379. Once again, it's 240-343-7379 and roll that voicemail.
Hey guys, Justin here. I'm calling just to thank you for the work that you guys, gals, are doing. It means a lot to me. I went through a change in my faith about 1.5 years ago, and as part of that journey, I've been able to draw closer to my brother, who left the Christian faith many years ago, but I think in many ways wanted a way back, or at least thought there may be something different. And it wasn't until he and I started listening to you guys together that started to open up for him. So, anyway, you're doing great things, so keep it up. Thanks, bye.
Oh, wow. Well, that was awesome. Justin, thank you. Man, thank you for taking time just to send us a little message there on the hotline and let us know that what we're doing makes a difference in your life. And that's awesome. It's beautiful. I love getting messages like that. It does make it even more fulfilling, I think, for all of us to be a part of what we're doing here. We have a lot of fun, but we also recognize that what we're doing is bringing some people some hope and light. And so, yeah, it's good to hear it. Thank you so much.
That was really fun to listen to. Yeah, thank you so much for calling. I love it that you're having new opportunities for these deep conversations and hopefully some new language to talk to your brother. Yeah, about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Justin, we really appreciate you, brother. Thank you for calling in. And I'll tell you something, with all that we do and all that we say, and we have all been lightning rods for this on this theological journey. And for someone to show us that kind of love is just really, really appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I agree with all of that. Thank you.
Awesome. So with that wonderful, wonderful voicemail, let's go ahead and turn to our Heretic of the Week.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
Hi, I'm Rita, and I used to think I was a heretic.
Hi, Rita.
Rita, welcome to the Heretic of the Week segment. And tell us a little bit about yourself and why in the world people would call you a heretic.
Well, I was born in Japan and came to the United States when I was 6, but I was raised in a Buddhist family till I was 6. And when I came to the United States, Christianity didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I eventually got baptized in a Baptist church because I wanted to be part of the ministers' community. But this whole idea that Jesus died for my sins and I was a really horrible person that caused it just didn't land on me. So when I got to college, I got a whole different picture of who Jesus might be in Bible classes. And that's the first time Christianity started to make sense to me as a revolutionary movement against oppression rather than as some kind of sacrificial thing for me as a bad person. So I just never actually bought the whole idea of the atonement or original sin. Didn't make sense to me. I remember once when I was 12, this revival preacher tried to, get me saved. And I remember sitting there listening to him go on and on about hell. And I thought, I don't think I'm that bad. I just refused to be saved. I thought I didn't think I was perfect, but I didn't think I was this miserable worm. So it just never took with me. And so when I got to college, I thought, oh, there's another way to think about being Christian. But there was just so much atonement theology around. And Jesus, like you had to declare that Jesus was your personal Lord and Savior. And that stuff didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then I discovered feminism right after college. And so I went off to seminary, a radical feminist, which also made me allergic to the idea of a male savior. So there were a whole lot of reasons why I thought I was a heretic. Like I was a feminist that didn't think women needed saving through a male person. And that this male person died for me didn't make any sense at all because I didn't think I was so bad that I deserved what he got. So I sort of took a different turn and thought I was going to do Buddhist Christian dialogue for my PhD program because I was kind of interested in existentialism and Buddhism as a sort of interesting pair in a Buddhist Christian dialogue format. But I got persuaded by one of my professors to tackle this question of who the hell is Jesus after all. It's a Christology question. And I wound up writing on how he is not our savior. Love is not something an individual person possesses. It's a relationship. So he was an instrument of creating love in a community, but he wasn't the savior of it. In that sense of him taking everything on and doing it all by himself. So all that there was just a lot of that made me pretty convinced that I was way outside the Christian tradition of anything Orthodox. So that's why I thought I was a heretic.
Well, it sounded to me like you just needed to read Augustine to get you right on all that worm stuff.
I read a lot of him in graduate school. I just thought he was a morose sex addict.
You obviously need a little John Calvin in your life.
Yeah,
no one needs that. No one needs that.
Yeah, so when I first met Rita, I think it was my second Sunday in Berkeley, and I went to this church, and she happened to be giving the sermon and kind of blew me away with some of these ideas condensed into a 30-minute sermon. I have no idea what the text was about, one of the feeding stories in the New Testament. So it was a great introduction to Berkeley and arriving to grad school.
Well, the thing was, I studied a lot of Bible in college because it was fascinating to me, and it still fascinates me. I mean, I still like preaching from the lectionary to try to unpack a text, but I don't, have the idea that it's some kind of holy writ that you can't disagree with or struggle with, like any great literature. But because it's my tradition, I feel like it compels me to grapple with it in a way that if I don't want to read a book, even if it's a classic, it's no cost to me. But because it's my tradition, I feel compelled to take the Bible more seriously than a lot of other things, but I don't think it's like the word of God in that sense that it's always true.
Right. So you say talking about taking it seriously, but probably not necessarily literally.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah. I was actually baptized into a fundamentalist Baptist church in high school, and the minister was my friend till he died. He was a great guy, and I just wanted to be a member of his church because his daughter and I were best friends, and he was a really great minister. But we argued all the time about evolution because I didn't believe in creationism.
Mhm.
So, but the thing I learned was that even though he was a fundamentalist and thought I was wrong, it for him it didn't affect my being able to be saved.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's oh, wow, nice.
Yeah.
And
Refreshing.
it sounds like grad school or college and sort of giving a framework of theology, like the larger world of theology, gave you a container.
Yeah.
to
Well, science,
explore.
you know what it was interesting is
Yeah.
8th grade, I was in Launchdale, Germany on a military base, and some of the people who wind up teaching at military schools are kind of they're not traditional public school teachers often. They're a little bit adventuresome or offbeat. And I had a science teacher named Mr. Scheiberg who loved to talk about evolution and he used Disney classical music films to teach stuff. And I mean, he was a really unusual science teacher. So I loved his science classes. And so, of course, I believed everything Mr. Scheiberg taught me. But his wife was my Sunday school teacher. And so Mrs. Scheiberg did the lessons. And so she wasn't a literalist at all. I think she taught it as story. And I remember I embarrassed her because one Sunday she was teaching about the circumcised and not circumcised. That was some kind of text in the New Testament, that fight about the Gentiles. And I
love that you were talking about circumcision and penises in your Sunday school class.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Early on. That's wonderful.
Well, it was interesting because it's the 8th grade class, and I actually knew the biology of circumcision because my dad was a medic and my mom was a nurse. So I knew what circumcision was. And I remember being totally puzzled by this conversation we were having in a Sunday school class because I thought, I must not understand what circumcision is as something spiritual because I couldn't imagine she was talking about penises.
It was totally reasonable to me.
Penis.
Right.
Penai.
Like,
Penai.
no, I'm like, what does she mean by what is it like circumcision? So I finally said, what does circumcision mean? And she blushed and said,
Right.
well, it's when they cut the foreskin off of, she explained it off of a baby's penis. And I said, no, I know that, but what does it mean in the Bible?
It can't mean that in the Bible.
Okay,
Exactly.
I got to say this. I'm completely blown away because listen, I've talked to people about theological subjects, for the last 20 years. But what's amazing, what's amazing to me, Rita, is that you seem to have come from this. Basically, you had a singularity from the beginning. It's like a lot of us, we kind of go through this evolution. We start off, all nice sweetness and light, and then we dive deep into legalism, and then we're rescued from that. But what I'm hearing from you, and I have to admit, in just these few minutes that we've been talking, I am a complete fanboy. I'm completely blown away because basically you have never been in the box to get out of the box. That's what it sounds like to me. And it's just absolutely, God, my soul is overjoyed right now. I'm
I
sorry.
think it's only because I called Augustine a morose sex addict and then talked about circumcision.
Well, you had me a penis, but
Well, it is interesting, Rita, because it's like, it's sort of like you were immune somehow. You came over here and you were exposed to all the same crap we were, even as a child, and yet it just rolled right off of your back. Whereas the rest of us just swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Yeah.
You grew up with this in this military family, and I can imagine some formative years. And now you're doing this soul repair work with the Volunteers of America. Yeah. You're working on moral injury. And I know I've read your book, Proverbs of Ashes, which preceded some of that, which is an amazing read for anyone who who feels inclined to learn why even more deeply why penal substitutionary atonement doesn't work. A wonderful book for that. But yeah, could you tell us a little bit about the moral trauma work you do and like what that even is? I imagine this is going to resonate at a deep level.
Yeah. So I got into this work because I was an anti-war activist, which is interesting. And I ran across this idea of moral injury. And a major essay was published in 2009, and I got to see it before it got published. And what it is that here, the essay doesn't put it this way, but here's how I would put it in terms of why I was so captivated by the idea. Is that moral injury posits or actually claim? I mean, I'm going to have to tell you, this is a psychiatrist saying this, not a theologian. But as a theologian, I resonated with it. They're claiming we're born moral. In other words, we're not born sinful. We are born moral because it's so essential to love, to be moral, that it just so defines who we are as human beings, that everyone has a moral conscience. And so moral injury is when you face a life context or situation or event that is so devastating that you lose that sense of being a moral person. So it can be going to war and having to kill, which is, in the veteran space, that a lot of the stuff the military asks them to do can cause it. But it could be, I have a friend who was in a car accident as a teenager, and he'd been drinking and he wound up killing someone. He's never gotten over that. So it can happen. That's just an instance bad judgment, but it can just become a defining feature of your life. So it's like you have a moral trauma. And if you don't resolve it, if you don't work it through, it can lead you to despair, to cynicism, to suicide. And so I, as I said to Katie one time, I don't believe in original sin, but I think there's early original trauma that can wreck people's lives.
Yeah.
Like being violently abused, like being sexually abused, or like being in a really terrible situation when you're a kid and you have to steal food, or do you do things you know are wrong to survive a bad condition?
What an amazing way to rethink sin.
Yeah. And it's stuff you do, but it's also stuff done to you.
Right. It's what's done to you.
Yeah. It's both. It's like, and in fact, most people, when it's done to them, especially if it's your parents doing this to you, I used to work with high school kids. So there would be abuse that would just be shocking. And yet you would have someone say, but I know my dad loves me, so I was bad.
Right.
Right. Because it's actually preferable to believe you're a terrible person than to believe you aren't loved.
Sure.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I wonder, how does that trauma, because you have a unique perspective on faith.
Yeah.
And how does that unpacking this moral trauma in a religious context? I mean, how do you see people emerging from that, or dealing from that, or healing from that?
It actually takes a person who's not going to judge, who can hear what they're carrying and all the pain behind it, and not be afraid of that pain, but sit with them, and to listen and to believe and validate their experience. And once they can start beginning to talk about it, and they can and unload some of the pain that's been driving that trauma in them, then the processing, they begin to be able to understand that underneath the trauma of moral injury is that conscience that's demanding to be heard. And it's that's that sense of conscience that's our sense of agency in the world as well. And to reclaim that, and then to find a way to understand a system of morality that can integrate what happened to you. So recovery from moral injury is not like instant. It's a long, slow process of figuring these things out. So, and I think the theological question of theodicy is a key moral injury question.
Hmm.
So and this is the psychological research on moral injury. The more harsh and judgmental and punishing your idea of a higher power is, the harder it is to recover from moral injury.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a hard thing to unlearn,
Yeah.
too. It gets embedded so deeply.
So deeply. That's right. There's one vet in this film about veteran moral injury called Almost Sunrise, who figured out that the root of his moral injury. There was a lot of stuff that happened in the war to him in Iraq, but the thing that he was able to process some of it, but there was something he wasn't quite able to identify inside himself that was making him miserable. And it turned out he was not religious, but he'd been raised Catholic. And in a power yoga thing for veterans, a healing power yoga thing, it finally came up for him what he was miserable about. And he was miserable because he was furious at God for allowing his best friend to die in battle. So in his unreligious person was this idea of a God who just basically let his friend die, or it was like he had ordained that he was going to die. And he was furious with that God. And he finally realized that he had to forgive God before he could forgive himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen is like when young men and women come back from war, they come back from Afghanistan, they come back from Iraq, and it's hard to turn off what had to be turned on over there in order to because basically the military at its most essential is designed to kill people and break things. So when you have people that they do that and this is the switch that's been turned on, and then they have to come back home and they have to turn that off and deal with normal society. So how?
Yeah, I think it's a little more complicated than that, because you don't have to even have been in battle. You could have been a medic or a supply clerk and have moral injury. It's not quite as simple as, well, if you go and you kill, then you have it. It's also this is something I've learned working a lot with people in the military and veterans. It isn't that the military turns you into somebody who just has to kill all the time and break things. It's not like that. It's like this journalist who wrote a book on moral injury because he was embedded with Marine Corps. He says the military doesn't turn people into killers. You can teach people to shoot a gun and they just go crazy. He said in the military, they teach you how to be incredibly effective with a weapon, and then they teach you to stop shooting when you want to shoot. That you have to obey orders, and there are laws and rules around killing, and you're not a killer, you're a soldier, and it's a different thing. And so there's an incredible discipline in the way that the military teaches people to be combat soldiers or Marines or whatever. And that isn't actually necessarily something they turn on or off. It's just a discipline they learn. But what's difficult, I think, unless they're like a little bit out of kilter. But what's hard when you leave the military, there's several things that are hard. One is that, you have this training and it's not useful for much else. And it's very intense and it's driven by pressure. And it's a group ethos. So suddenly you're dumped on the street all by yourself, and you have to learn how to function in a society where people are never on time. And they say they're going to do things and then they don't do them, and they don't keep their commitments. They can't meet deadlines. They don't have a sense of purpose. And all they are into is they're mad at their parents for not paying their phone bill or something. So the sense of the trivialness of consumer culture and individual success that dominates civilian societies for a lot of veterans is such a foreign planet that they feel like they landed from Mars, because they're used to having a mission, a sense of purpose, and a team. And that's one of the hardest things. And then, of course, if you were in the military and you did your job, you might even get a medal for killing, and people will high five you and buy you beers. So it may not sink into you that that was necessarily something to regret or feel bad about. But as you sort of come back into civilian society and you realize nobody's going to understand your experience, and then you start rethinking it and you wonder, well, what moral human being gets a medal for killing? And so you can then you can go down a pretty deep vortex of moral injury as you rethink your military experience.
Yeah.
So the moral injury is amplified by the loss of community.
Yep. It's one of the biggest pieces of suffering and moral injury is feeling totally isolated and self-isolating because you're so ashamed of who you are. You don't want anybody to know who you are.
This has such parallels to people who are coming out of toxic church environments.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And I don't know if that qualifies as moral injury, but certainly as trauma.
It does. You were betrayed by a tradition. I actually have this, like, someday when this we can meet with people again. I have this thought that to write a grant to form moral injury processing groups for people who are spiritual but not religious, need a community but would never go back to church, but need to figure out how they can trust other people enough again to have a real commitment to what we would call a church community, but probably wouldn't look anything like what we have now. But I think that there's a deep hunger for that in people who have walked away because they've been betrayed by traditions. Or there is also, like, second generation from immigrant families where the theology of those churches and the language of them don't work for them anymore. So they're also alienated from their roots, but not so much because of bad theology, although that may be part of it. But the white liberal church doesn't work for them either. So there's a whole lot of people floating around in the group, the fastest growing group in the country, which is spiritual but not religious, or nuns, that I think would benefit from thinking more carefully about their hurts. That the sense of betrayal or outrage, that's a sign of moral injury, because it's a moral response to some harm done. If it's not to you directly, it's to your gay and lesbian friends or whatever, and it's infuriating.
Yeah. Do you know who Dr. Marlene Winnell is?
No. Who is that?
I just ran across her probably about a year or so ago.
Uh-huh.
She kind of coined the term religious trauma syndrome. It's very similar to what we're talking about. And she's a psychologist, and really started identifying exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, but connected to people who had been raised in fundamental Christian homes and experienced what she termed religious trauma syndrome when they started questioning their beliefs when they went to college, for example, and they started saying, well, maybe the Bible isn't inerrant and infallible, and maybe Noah's Ark isn't, a documentary, and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And then she said, it's not like finding out when you're a kid there's no tooth fairy, because some people assume. She said a lot of psychologists will assume that, oh yeah, get over it, it's not a big deal. She said, no, for people that go through this, who start questioning their faith and doubting the Christianity they grew up with in various ways, they experience, it's your whole reality turns upside down, right?
Yeah.
This is the way you thought the world, the universe worked. This is the way who you thought God was and who you are. Your identity now has been,
your core character is challenged, and that's one of the things that one of the early thinkers about moral injury made a case for. And I think this is so important, that in the world of psychology, it's always been believed that if you had good parents, your character is set for life. And if you have psychological problems as an adult, it's because your parents didn't toilet train you right, or they were mean to you, or whatever, that you had bad parents, and they mouse-shaped you from the time you were a child. So my friend Mac Bika, who went to Vietnam as in the Marine Corps because his best friend died there, and he decided he had to go because he couldn't face his friend's parents, and so he had to defer as a school teacher. Well, he went in as a Marine captain and came out totally wrecked. And he went to the VA for help, and they basically tried to convince him that his mom hadn't potty trained him correctly. And he was furious, and he left, and he started doing his own counseling with vets, and he just rejected that whole awful stuff. And so this psychiatrist who spent 20 years working with Vietnam era vets says, you can have a perfectly good human being, good character, does everything right, got a lot of courage, is idealistic and caring, and just a great person. And you can put him into a situation so bad their character's wrecked.
Yeah.
And an example was Achilles in the Iliad.
Yeah.
So this is
I'm trying to remember my Achilles story.
Achilles was a great leader soldier, and he won a prize that was this woman.
Oh, right.
Because he was such a noble and good soldier as a leader. And the king decided he wanted the woman instead and stole his prize. Now, there are gender issues that you have to unpack here, but
Sure.
but the fact that the king basically disrespected him and slapped him in the face made him go berserk. In rage, and his character just fell apart. So that he used that as an example, and there are plenty of other examples from people who just couldn't pull their sense of who they were back together enough to function. And moral injury is not a minor thing, but it is. The thing I keep saying is, it's not a clinical condition. It's not a psychiatric disorder. It means you have a working conscience. It's just mad at you.
Well, and I'm also thinking too of the implications of personal relationships with moral injury, with moral trauma, with people who stay in abusive relationships because they have this idea that they are a worm, that they have to endure suffering like Jesus endured suffering, and how liberatory this could be for people who are recovering, and when they can see themselves as a recipient of trauma, and they're unable to it's really hard to negotiate that space right when you're in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it takes that safe, non-judgmental, loving spaciousness to be able to start to make other choices.
Right. Well, and the reason, I said at the beginning, I used to think I was a heretic, and I don't think I am anymore. It's because when I did my Christology, it was all about the way it sort of was a Holy Spirit Christology. It was like, it's what connects us all together in love that makes love real. It's not one person who hands it out like candy. And the fact that he left this legacy, that a movement that survived him was a testimony to his success. But that it's not a good thing that he was tortured and murdered and basically lynched. That is a thing the church mourns, not celebrates for. And that makes Good Friday very ambiguous if you have to be glad that Jesus went through such a terrible process, right?
Wow.
It's a really icky moral confusion, because it also absolves the people who did the evil from any responsibility because they were doing God's will.
Yes.
So all of that is really morally compromising. How can you have a moral compass when you get handed that load of mess, right?
Wow.
So there's that. Well, so then my friend Rebecca Parker and I both have this problem with atonement theology, and we wrote a Proverbs of Ashes to critique it and say there's another way. But that was a memoir book, and we realized we had to make the scholarly case. We had to do enough research to show that this was not the only form of Christianity that was possible, because everybody thinks that is Christianity. And there was a 19th century Baptist preacher named Hosea Ballou that went around saying the atonement is the worst idea ever, and that it did more harm to Christianity than all its despisers combined. So we weren't alone in thinking this. But we went back to, I don't remember how we got all into it, but what drove our original curiosity about early church stuff was we discovered that there's not an image of the crucifixion of Jesus dead on a cross for the first 1,000 years of Christianity in any church, right?
Yes.
So it's like, why, if that was so important, isn't it there? It's everywhere now. You just see these gory, bloody, awful looking things. So we started researching, and what we discovered was to believe that people are born blessed, and that the best thing God wants is a human being fully alive and flourishing, not suffering. That Jesus didn't come to die for us. He came to show us what life lived in the Holy Spirit looks like as a community that cares for the sick and feeds the hungry and teaches the ignorant and celebrates the abundant feast of life every week in the Eucharist, which is hosted by the risen Christ and has nothing to do with his crucifixion. All of that is just flat out Orthodox Christianity.
Wow.
It's not
that.
heretical at all.
Thank you.
In fact, the atonement really didn't emerge as a major doctrine. There were a few early church fathers that kind of had an atonement theology, and they were also very anti-Jewish, which tells you something. But the theology really came with the Crusades as war propaganda. That's what the atonement is meant to be.
It's early Goebbels.
Yeah, well, it comes with Charlemagne. It was a terror campaign against the Saxons, but it didn't take hold. There was a 200-year dispute about it, and eventually it became heretical not to believe in the atonement and the dead body on the table that you were eating. This necrophiliac thing that Mary Daly criticizes. So all of that is late. It's 1,000 years into Christian history. Half our history, people would have been shocked at that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I figure that's the heresy.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm Orthodox now.
We've come full
Thank
circle.
you.
You've
here.
got it, ladies and gentlemen. You've got it.
So Rita, I just want to ask you, how can our listeners connect with you? How can they get your material? How can they reach out to you? How can they hear from you and learn more from you? Because this is absolutely fantastic.
Well, I'm not doing a lot of theology now. I'm actually implementing moral injury programs at Volunteers of America. I actually left academia, so I actually help people instead of just teach about helping people. But I am my email is rbrock@voa.org, and my Shea Moral Injury Center there has a website, and you can sign up for newsletters and updates on events. Once we can all get together again, we'll start having our conferences and things that we've been doing. And once I'm on the road again speaking, we'll start posting stuff there. Right now, I'm just working on online programs for medical caregivers with moral injury. We're trying to set up a program to help people who've been basically in a battlefield called the U.S. hospitals.
Yeah, and one more time, what's the website?
VOA, Volunteers of America, VOA.org. And if you just do a / moral injury, you'll find me there.
Cool.
Perfect.
And volunteers is not people who don't get paid. Volunteers is people who choose to do things rather than being forced. Yeah, right. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much
Awesome.
for spending some time with us, and I'm sure I want to encourage the listeners to go check that stuff out because it's going to be helpful, and I know people are going to resonate with this. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say that the book in which we describe how Rebecca and I describe how Orthodox we are is called Saving Paradise.
So there's Saving Paradise, and the precursor to that is Proverbs of Ashes.
Yeah. Saving Paradise is, well, if you don't believe in the atonement, what can you believe? And the early church believed that when you were baptized into the Garden of Eden.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, no original sin there.
Wow.
Nope.
I love it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Rita, again, thank you so much for being our guest, being our heretic of the week.
And I want to say Augustine is not a morose sex addict. He called the world a smiling place.
Even Augustine can be redeemed. Hallelujah.
Don't email us about that,
Yes.
people. Don't email.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Was that smile orgasmic? I wonder.
Well,
no, he
rumors.
thought sex was like a handshake in heaven. No lust involved. None at all.
Oh, wow. All right.
Okey-dokey.
But he at least thought there was sex in heaven. That's one thing. Some people don't think that.
I'm going to have to pull out a dusty volume tonight and get to reading.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rita. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That was awesome. Rita, man, thank you so much.
It was amazing to have Rita on the show. I've known her for such a long time, and just a true pleasure and joy to hear all of her theological insights, and she's just so smart.
Yep, and just very, very transparent.
And it may not have been about that, but it's sometimes you got to make an abrupt left, and that's what we're going to do with today's topic. We're in the midst of the conspiracy theory series, and today is all about QAnon, 5G, COVID-19. Shit is getting real. And,
this isn't just a hard left. It's like a left, a right, and up, and down.
Well, whatever it is, it's going to get real in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, that was a zig and a zag and a motherfucking zag.
Oh, man. So, guys, this is unlike the Sasquatch episode and the alien abduction moon landing episodes. I know a little bit about 5G, and I have a few friends who totally buy into the whole COVID is a hoax thing. But like the QAnon thing, I know very little about it. So you know what? I guess I'm here to learn. You guys help me understand this. What are these conspiracy theories about? What's it all about, and why are they true or false?
I'm with Keith. I'm also on a little bit of a learning curve with some of these because anytime we get into contemporary government stuff, I can sometimes get a little bit itchy, but I do have my chart open and I'm eager to fill it in with where we land on all of these. So we're keeping our record of our individual beliefs around these conspiracy theories.
Well, I'm going to throw this in. I am a software engineer by profession, and I work with 5G shit every day. And so I got a thing or two to say about that.
Well, you want to start with 5G and then we'll go to QAnon after?
Yeah, you know the truth, Derek. You know the truth.
What?
Tell us
Or
the
you
truth.
want a deep state conspiracy.
You're on the inside, my man.
Let me first tell you that 5G, do you guys remember back when we had old school TV, channels 2 through 13? Come on, Keith, at least you know.
At least
We
Keith.
used to have it. I still have one of those.
We had tinfoil on the antenna. Yeah.
Oh my God! So speaking of tinfoil,
I use VHS. I have VHS. I still get my discs from Netflix in the mail.
Right on.
No, the fuck you don't.
Do you have a VCR too, Keith?
I do. I really do. I'll show you a picture.
But do you watch porn on VCR? That's the.
I don't watch porn at all. So.
No. Here's the deal. 5G is basically a repurposing of the frequency bandwidth that was once occupied by VHF television, right? So basically, in terms of the frequency the frequency that travels through the air, it's really no different than what we have with VHF television. So if that was causing cancer and causing COVID and causing all of these other maladies, and that this is something that can secretly spy on everything, basically that technology was there. The only difference is that this particular frequency spectrum is able to handle more digital bandwidth. And so that means that you get faster internet speeds. It's like the equivalent of going from a 2-lane highway to an 8-lane interstate. That's basically the easiest way of looking at it. And what this is enabling is there is a technology that's called IoT, or Internet of Things. And basically it allows things to be connected that ordinarily wouldn't be. Like, for example, there are smart refrigerators now that will tell you when you're low on butter and tell you when, and basically it can all be connected. So it's connected to your Amazon Prime, so that when you run low on butter, Amazon ships you some butter. Isn't that neat? That's technology. That's all it is. It's a way of simplifying and accelerating the technologies that we already have.
But the conspiracy though is that it's currently the conspiracy is that it's given you what we're calling COVID, right?
Right. So basically what you're saying then is that an electronic frequency can either cause or stimulate a viral infection, which there is nothing in medical science that supports that theory.
Well, of course not.
I mean, it's like basically everything that comes out in support of that train of thought is something that's from some crackpot website, some YouTuber that wears a lab coat or some crazy shit like that. Basically, if you look at the medical community, the technological community, all of the basic scientific communities that would be involved in this, all of them call bullshit on it. Now, of course, that's where the conspiracy comes in, because somebody's hiding something. But the reality is that in this particular case, this is something that makes life better. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where you don't have to have a cable or a router in your home. 5G is going to accommodate all of that, and you'll just be able to tap into it wherever you are.
Wait, you're telling me I can one day get rid of Comcast?
Exactly.
Oh,
praise Jesus.
Right.
Yeah, for me, it's Cox, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
What's
funny is that when COVID started, there were a bunch of countries that don't have 5G that were having a lot of cases, and I always found that funny because if 5G was supposedly causing COVID-like symptoms, which obviously, like you just said, Derek, there's no evidence, there's no medical evidence of that. I just thought it was funny that all these people had COVID in countries that 5G was not available yet.
Is there
Yeah.
another conspiracy with 5G other than relationship to COVID?
Oh, well, yeah, like spying, basically spying on people, the ability to look into people's homes and facial recognition and all of these things. Let me tell you something. In England, you can't go anywhere in Metro London where there are not cameras, where they are using facial recognition, license plate detection, and all of these things. And they were doing this before they had 5G. They've been doing this for years. In China, same thing. China is pioneering these technologies even before 5G came aboard. All 5G does, 5G is a facilitator. It's a technology that enables increased bandwidth and faster speeds. That's all.
So let's look at the fear. Like, what's the fear that might be driving some of the 5G frenzy? So is it fear of technology? Is it, we do have a lot of technology that can be that is a little alarming, right? That for me anyway, that there's like, this facial recognition software, that we're always trying to get faster. We're always trying to sort of up our game. Do we think that that's some of the fear? Is it possible that some of the fear that's driving some of the conspiracy theories around 5G?
I think that there's definitely some fear around it. Basically, anytime you have a sea change in technology, and that's what this represents, there's always going to be some fear around it. I think that the problem is that we have a handful of yahoos who like to engage in fear mongering and basically bullshit and fuckery that they put these things out there with the intention of trying to stir up something. And there are some people that like to trade in that. Even before the internet, there were chain letters and things like that were warning you about this, that, and the other, and the coming end times. All this is the modern equivalent of that. It's the same thing.
It's just the new mark of the beast.
Exactly. I mean, that's literally what it is, Katie.
It should be called 6G.
Well,
666.
yeah, when 6G comes along, you better believe that's what it's going to be.
So yeah, the first time I think here's what I don't think you touched on this, but it was actually maybe a year ago. So this before COVID, it was a thing. What I had heard about 5G was, I think there was a guy who was like the former vice president. He was like he's high up executive. I want to say at Motorola, but it might have been another company. But anyway, it's something related to cell phone companies. And he quit, and he put this YouTube video out warning people about 5G, that he had tried to warn people at his company and they fired him for it, but he could not be a part of this because it was just, and he was talking more about 5G as just something that was dangerous, that it could be either something that would hurt people as far as like, cause cancer or brain injuries or I don't know, something. But then, so that was the first I heard about 5G, was sort of like from that. And I thought, well, I don't know if it's true or not, but I mean, it seems if this guy is who he says he is, that seemed like possibly a credible source, but I didn't know. And it didn't go any farther than that. Then a few months after that, but still before COVID, I had heard something about, and actually even saw a document. I mean, I looked it up and I actually found it, and I couldn't find it before this episode, unfortunately. But at the time I looked it up and I was able to find, something about this, that there was a time when, maybe early 2000s, when the CIA were experimenting on a non-lethal weapon, and they were using frequencies, which they called 5G, that were sort of crowd control frequencies that would either cause like a riot or a crowd of people protesting. It would cause them to become docile, or you could even turn it. They become fearful or something like that. And that seemed again like, well, maybe that's real. I don't know. But again, it was just one source. And again, I can't find it now. So I don't know how real it is. But then all of a sudden it became like COVID hit, and it became, oh no, 5G is causing COVID. I'm like, what? Like now it's just like, it's a catch-all for anything. It's like chemtrails or something. Like let's just blame everything on 5G now. It just makes no sense.
Yeah. Now I'm looking at results. What is the end game? What actually is what comes out of this? And now we look at most of Europe. now is already on. I mean, Europe and the Far East are way ahead of us in terms of the 5G rollout, right? And you're not seeing any of the things that the fearmongers have put out there. There are no widespread mind control events. There are no widespread disease spreading events. There's none of that. I mean, basically, all this is just it's a sea change in technology, and what it's going to mean is that basically the holy grail of network connectivity is this ubiquitous internet. In other words, the internet that's everywhere and it's always on and it's always fast. It's never blocked, throttled, or anything like that. That's what 5G represents. And once it's out there, it has the possibility or the potential of replacing ground-based fiber. And that's the big deal.
So that part sounds cool. I will say I can sense I don't have a particular fear. I'm not part of the conspiracy theory, but like we said for years, oh no one's fooling with your camera on, there's no data mining on your TV. There's no data mining on your computer or on your phone, but it turns out there is a lot of data mining. Yeah. So when we kind of go, I can see like the domino, like you go 1 + 1 + 1 somehow equals 1,000. It can feel like a rabbit trail down. Like what's the things we don't know about the technology and what it can do for us. And 5G, it is like, I'm grateful you explained it because it does seem like a little mysterious to me.
Listen, if you look back throughout history, information has been a commodity throughout history. And it's always been who can get the best information the fastest. And then once you get the information is what you do with it. How do you aggregate it? How do you collate it? How do you disseminate it? All of that. And so now what you have is you have all of these devices that basically are data collection agents. So now you also have things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and high level analytics that are able to crunch this data in real time and produce some really meaningful statistics. All it is information. What it's going to mean is that people are going to be able to sell to you better because instead of being reactive to your needs, perceived or real, they're going to be proactive. I mean, basically, you'll have things that just kind of show up. That's part of how Facebook is able to advertise to you. Have you ever been in a room talking with someone about, let's say, Christmas trees? If you talk about Christmas trees and maybe text about Christmas trees, Facebook, you'll see an ad for Christmas trees.
Oh yeah, that's happened to me several times.
I mean, and all they're doing is they're aggregating data from your device. And part of your Facebook agreement says that you agree to allow this data to be exchanged and to be used for whatever purpose, and they're able to advertise to you. At the end of the day, that's what it is. Now, it sounds kind of sinister because, hey, they're getting the drop on your desires before you really even want it. But if you think about it, that's the holy grail of advertising and marketing.
Yeah, and that's why I have sex toy advertisements on all my socials. I guess.
Yeah, it's like saying dildo will do that for you.
Great. Y'all, I'm going to open up Facebook after this. And what are the ads going to be on there now that you've said that, Matt?
Well, you're welcome.
Dildo. Yep. It's like the Magic Ink.
Well, I mean, that's not a conspiracy, but the 5G, are we kind of where we're not affirming this conspiracy in the running tally?
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy. That's me.
All right, that's me too.
Well, it is a conspiracy. I just don't think it's real.
Well, okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So
I don't believe it.
We have another unanimous no.
Okay.
Finally.
Holy crap.
All right.
All the heretics agree.
So all the heretics agree with that, and let's since we mentioned COVID, let's and its so-called relation to 5G. The COVID conspiracy is that it was, I guess that it's all just been a hoax, or all the data's been made up or falsified.
I think there's a couple of conspiracies. There's a couple of conspiracy
right, there's more than one.
Yeah.
I like live bats, and I cannot lie.
Yeah, the bats one. Yeah.
Can we just all pause and give a salute to 2019, that crazy carefree year?
I want to go back there. If I had a time
Pre-pandemic.
machine, I'd go back to 2019 or 18.
Or just January 2020.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. This time of intense learning and global retreat. We're 6 or 7 months in. So COVID, one theory, right, is that it's not real anyway, that the numbers are made up, that what are some of the others?
Well, that it was created in a lab in China.
Yeah.
That it's a way for the government to take control. And the step one is getting you to wear a mask. And then that turns you into some kind of a tool or zombie. And then once they have taken control of you because you're wearing a mask, then I guess the next thing is to, I don't know, put a number on your forehead and stick you in a concentration camp. I don't understand.
Well, but like, so population, like that it's a planned virus and deliberately released to reduce population is one, like kind of an extreme version of one. And that it is like kind of there's kind of overtones of a one world government.
Yeah. Bill Gates is involved somehow.
Oh my God.
And Soros.
George Soros, yeah.
I did put on Facebook a couple of months ago, why is everyone mad at Bill Gates? Like 20,000 comments later, I had to delete the post.
Yeah. It's
so
crazy.
people have strong opinions. And I want to really acknowledge that because I know some of our listeners will. I know some people in my communities have really strong feelings about COVID. So I want to speak just in this section, especially with respect to all the people in my life. And I am going to be talking about the ideas and kind of going down the rabbit hole.
Well, okay. In respect of them, my wife is an RN and COVID is real.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'll just say that.
Yeah, two close family members of mine have had COVID.
Yeah. I've had several close family members and one cousin that died of it, and I know 5 pastors in Detroit that died of it. I mean, this is real shit. And on top of that, there was an issue where there was a mortician in New York City that basically he had a contract with the hospital to take, to basically to take remains from the hospital. And he was literally overrun to the point where it was like, basically he had a trailer full of decaying bodies. I mean, it was bad. And the thing is that this is something that's real. It's really happening. And listen, this is what I say about the mask, right? If you don't believe that this is real, fine. And you want to go on about your life, great. But just wear a fucking mask, because it's just out of respect for the rest of humanity. In that, number one, if you have it, you don't give it, and then 2, if you don't have it, you don't get it.
Yeah,
it's real simple. It's not rocket science. It's just a simple, courtesy to humanity.
Yeah, but here's what I don't get, and unfortunately I have at least 2 friends. I will not name them out of respect for them, but I will just admit that I really, really don't get it. These are both Christian people.
Problem number 1.
And they are militant anti-maskers. I mean, they see this as a threat to their freedoms. They see this as an attack on, some of them see it as an attack on Christianity because, that's why the government won't let us worship anymore in churches. They're shutting down
the same people who will say that. And I'm going to say this because this is something just chaps my hide, that the same people that will say, well, a mask is an infringement upon my liberties, they are silent when Black people are killed by police. So I'm like, really fuck what you say, honestly.
Yeah.
And the virus is disproportionately affecting Black communities, affecting many communities, right? So this is well, I wonder if we can kind of go down like one by one, like the origins of COVID. Like one of the theories is that it was started in a lab and it either got out on accident or on purpose. And so like 2 different trains of thought, or that's like Derek said, someone ate a bat.
You know what? Accidentally, I could buy that, and I'll tell you why. Because if someone was trying to weaponize a virus, this could be a good candidate. The only problem with it is that it's not like Ebola. Ebola is like when you really get people who got Ebola, it was like you were going to die. I mean, you weren't just going to die. You were going to die miserably. You're going to be bleeding from your eyeballs, bleeding from your asshole, bleeding everywhere, right? Every orifice. It was really bad stuff. And if you're going to weaponize something, you're not going to put something out here that maybe maybe it might be fatal. Maybe it might. No, it's like when you get into, like, here's another conspiracy. I don't know if you guys know about the conspiracy around Lyme disease, right? And Plum Island in New York. Well, anyway, there's a thing about that Lyme disease was an engineered attack. Now that, if you want to make a case for something, that really does, because when you get it, there is no, you might get symptoms or you might go through something. People that get Lyme disease, it really fucks them up. I mean, really bad. And even people that recover, they don't recover cleanly or nicely. It's not. It's a very brutal disease. So if you're looking at something that's weaponized, you want to make sure that the efficacy of it is really, really up there. And this isn't that.
Yeah, that's part of the. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but that's part of the reason why this whole thing about like depopulation. It's like, well, this disease attacks people with comorbidities and elderly people. Like, if you're gonna depopulate, you're not gonna have a disease that just takes out people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, this is just
part of the theory, though, is that those people are on pensions, on Social Security, are on, right? Like there's not enough money to cover their costs.
Which, yeah, I agree probably with that. Like, Social Security is probably going to be insolvent at some point. But I mean, where's the data though? That's just saying a what if. I mean, we can all say what ifs.
Yeah, so it's getting into the sort of mindset of like a deep state, like belief in a deep state, belief in a not quite one world government, but like belief that like there's sort of collusion among governments, I guess, around these issues, around these what ifs. Like I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of getting there.
Oh, totally. Which is what you have to do when trying to understand conspiracy theorists. I get it to some degree because, well, see, this is the thing about conspiracy theorists, and this is, I mean, what I talked about on my other podcast, shameless plug, but is that there's like shreds of truth in them, which is why they're powerful, is because, like, we're going to talk about QAnon. There is child trafficking, there is pedophilia. So when you talk about those things, people are like, yeah, of course that happens. But the problem is that they take those through like 20 non sequiturs to get to their conclusion, which they couldn't get to without the shreds of evidence there. So there could be shreds of truth in some of the things people are saying about COVID, but they're just taking them to lengths that you just can't do.
Well, I did call my sister, who has a doctorate in nursing, and she's much more conservative than I am. She's so I was like, "Do you have 5 minutes?" She said, "Yes." I was like, "I need to know, could, like, in a COVID vaccination?" She was like, "Yeah, we're nowhere near a vaccination." I said, "I know," but I was like, "Could there be like tracking devices in the vaccination?" And she paused and said, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "I guess people could microchip us, like you microchip a pet, but I don't see how that would really be in a vaccination." And she was like, "I'd be much more concerned with like data mining if you have to be concerned with something than a vaccine that doesn't exist and has 10 competing companies affecting you negatively."
So, here's something though that I did hear, that it's probably a real thing, and it's one of these things where it is probably true, but it's creating a lot of fear around COVID. And I just heard this the other day. They were talking about how, when the vaccine comes out, who knows when that's going to be, but if you decided not to take the vaccine, and you should have the right to refuse it, but even if you did, but what would happen is, you would not be allowed to travel to other countries, because legitimately other countries might say, well, we don't want people from America to fly here if they haven't had the vaccine. You might not even be able to travel to certain states. Like, airlines might be checking your shot records and say, well, no, I'm sorry, you can't fly here or there because, you're restricted. So that in itself, number one, I don't doubt that they probably will restrict people's travel based on whether they have or have not taken any kind of a vaccine. But that creates a fear in people. It just seems to like validate their fear that, they're just trying to control people. They're trying to keep us from our freedom.
That right now, there are countries that you can't go to if you haven't had certain vaccinations.
Right.
For example, if you haven't had a malaria vaccine.
Exactly.
You can't go. You can't get you could, you got your passport, but then you have to get a visa. And the visa, part of the condition of the visa is that you have to have a malaria vaccine. I mean, I just got a visa for India. and that was part of it. I had to prove that I had a malaria vaccine.
Wait, we have a malaria vaccine?
Well, it's a anti-malarial treatment. It's not a vaccine.
Oh yeah. I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
Malaria doesn't sound fun, but yeah.
No, it's not a vaccine. It's like basically you have to have evidence of having done the anti-malarial drug,
right? Which are a beast. If you've never done it, I've had to do it. Yeah. So if you have that fear, then that fear is super valid, right? But also COVID is mutating so quickly that I don't think we're going to have a vaccine, a broad spectrum vaccine anytime soon. But yeah, so that's a real fear though, and that could be realized.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think it's a conspiracy. It's a real fear.
As like having tracking devices. Listen, as someone who deals with technology on a daily basis, we don't have the sort of technology or nanotechnology that we're able to scale to hundreds of millions of people. I mean, it's like if that type of nanotechnology exists, it's very rare, it's very expensive, and it's something that maybe could be done in, maybe a particular, like for like Navy SEALs or something like that, but for the general populace, that it doesn't scale to that. And there's no net benefit.
Yeah, but can I just say, if you have a cell phone, you have a smartphone, you have a tracking device. And the government can listen to your conversations if they want to. And so it's sort of like, oh no, the government's going to have a tracking device. They're going to be able to know where I'm at any given time and listen to my conversations. And it's called an iPhone.
Yep. Yeah. So I feel like something like COVID, it's so unknown. It's frightening because we can't see, you can see the effects of it, but you can't like see the virus. Right. And so I feel like we kind of foist all of our anxieties onto this new thing, onto this illness. Like we have all these anxieties about all this other stuff. And then it all gets kind of micro focused or macro focused on something like COVID.
Well, so, there's also a political payload that's involved in this too. And that basically all of this feeds into this, and I don't want to pick on any group of people, but Trump supporters, sorry.
just to pick one randomly.
Just pick one out of the hat. It basically, these are folks that are saying that, okay, that this exists to undo the Trump presidency and all of the work that he's doing. And this, I'm kind of segueing into where we're going next, but the child trafficking and all of it is something that's playing on people's fears to try to get a certain part of a political base energized in order to coalesce power. And that's the part of it to me that when I look at it from the 50,000 foot political level, that's when my bullshit detector goes off.
Yeah, and it's so American centric. I mean, this thing is a worldwide pandemic, and so I mean, I don't know that. The whole thing to undermine Trump's presidency. Well, I guess the whole world can be in on it. And speaking of which, when we get to our next conspiracy, which will be the last one we cover, the QAnon conspiracy, which I mean, I don't even know where to start with that. I know COVID plays into it. COVID is a hoax plays into it. But the Q one is, for me, it's like the amalgamation of all the conspiracies. Like, everything is involved, and it's like one of those like charts you do on the wall inside of your cabin, and you've got all these strings that are connecting all these different things. And I mean, I don't know what you guys know about QAnon, but
it's like the conspiracy of conspiracies.
Yeah,
it's like
lay out the timeline for us, Matt.
But hang on for a second before we go there. We have to take the poll.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the poll. Yeah.
We have to take the poll. Where do we stand on 5G? Basically, the 5G conspiracy is bullshit from my standpoint.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
We all went bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. COVID.
Well, COVID's a real disease. Yes.
It's a real disease.
So no conspiracy there.
No conspiracy there. Yeah.
No, it's real. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Two unanimous no's.
Holy smokes.
This might be a record, guys.
Let's see what QAnon
okay, we need somebody to go full heretic here. I mean,
I'm trying to get into the mindset so I can get there.
We're holding back here.
This is like when people insist that I watch Ancient Aliens. As soon as I'm like, maybe, I know I have to turn the TV off. Like the second I'm like, I can kind of see. I'm like, no, I gotta back away. I gotta back away.
It's starting to work on you. See,
exactly.
Eric Von Däniken was right.
Well, for the QAnon one, I mean, it started as it started on 4chan, this kind of Reddit type. What is it? What is like a forum, almost internet
Yeah, it's
forum?
a forum for racists.
Well, okay, there you go. And this guy or this group of people known as Q were dropping hints on this 4chan network about they had some Q level clearance. I think Q is a high level government clearance, and they had information on the fact that the Clintons and other high level government officials and Hollywood elites like Tom Hanks and Oprah apparently were involved in some child trafficking pedophilic ring where they were killing kids and drinking the blood to get their adrenochrome so that
Adrenochrome,
they
yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, this makes
just
sense.
normal shit
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they
yeah.
can stay young forever. And Trump is apparently the man who is supposed to undo this whole ring, along with, as some of them say, JFK Jr., which he faked his death back in '99,
Yeah.
and he's been like the man behind the thing like for 20 years, and he's supposed to come out as like the new messianic figure.
He's like
You're
King,
making so much sense so far. So
right? Yeah.
when is it?
He's
When is
Jesus
it crazy?
2.0.
Where's the
He's
main
Jesus
part?
2.0,
No,
so we're
he's
all
like
on
King
board. So we
Arthur.
could,
He's coming
yeah,
back with the sword to.
yeah,
First of all, let me
Out of his
say
mouth.
something about the whole Q clearance, right? Let's start with that.
yeah.
The Q clearance is the top level Department of Energy clearance. It's the
Okay.
clearance that people have to have in order to work in nuclear power plants or to work with nuclear weapons. And basically when it comes to weapons, it's only for the disposal of nuclear weapons, not for active nuclear silo operators and so on and so forth.
Not for code.
No,
Look.
Q is not even a real. It's not a clearance like in something that you would have for NSA or CIA or DoD or something like that, because there are levels of secret that are way above Q clearance. But people say it, and it's one of those things. It's like the whole Goebbels theory of tell the biggest lie, tell it vociferously, and tell it often, and people accept it as truth. And so people think that this Q clearance is some big deal, and it really isn't. Basically, if you keep your credit tight, don't beat your wife, or don't engage in any sexual, peccadillos, you'll get a Q clearance. End of story. If
So-
if you're working in the nuclear industry.
The part of the theory, thank you, Derek, because I actually didn't know any of that.
It was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. The part of the theory where, well, hey, why are we bringing Tom Hanks into this? Tom Hanks is like a good, fun, nice, like the nice guy of
No,
Hollywood. What's up with
I mean,
that?
Forrest
I
Gump, Mr. Rogers, come on, man.
No, it's a cover. It's a cover.
Seriously. So, but the part about the child trafficking, the pedophilia, and drinking children's blood and eating them, and like all of that. So this reminds me of one of the accusations that was made against early Christians was that they were cannibalistic
Yep.
because of the
That's
Lord's
right.
Supper.
They ate Jesus.
Right? 'Cause
Yeah,
they ate
blood
the
and-
flesh and drank the blood.
blood.
And so this
Yep.
was a kind of a scapegoat accusation made at early Christians in order to indict them as scapegoats.
And do you know this adrenochrome thing goes all the way back to Plato and Socrates?
What is it?
I mean, basically, it's
Like vitamins?
it's a
What is it?
hormone that's secreted in the body. Generally, it's expressed in younger people, and the idea is that basically you have these child sacrifices that are taking place, and billionaires are extracting the adrenochrome from the dead bodies of these murdered children, and they're drinking it or injecting it or whatever, like Matt said at the beginning of the segment, to ostensibly stay young.
Wait, so how old is Tom Hanks supposed to be? And I got to tell you, it's not Tom Hanks. It would be Paul Rudd, because that man doesn't age. He has not
That was
aged
Dick
like
Clark.
25 years.
I think that Richard Gere is a far better candidate, but I don't want to say that. I have to back that off because I don't want to get sued for libel. But I mean, you look at people who really look good for their age, right? And some of the, I mean, you look at George Soros. George Soros looks old. Bill Gates looks old. These guys are not. They're not retarding their aging in any way.
By drinking children's blood.
They were born in the 1800s, though. That's what you don't understand.
Pretty good for their age. Well, so what's some of the fear that drives the QAnon the QAnon theory? I think one of them is like fear. Like we all have fear that
The deep
innocent,
state.
vulnerable children will be taken. Right?
The deep
So I
state.
have, and that's a totally legitimate fear, like Matt said, and I do want to just put a plug in for the episode where Matt talks about this in Apostates Anonymous, because it's really good. And but so we do know that pedophilia exists. We know that trafficking exists, human trafficking exists. I wrote a whole book about human trafficking in the ancient world. All right, that's what my dissertation is about. So we know that all of these things exist. They're not new. They've been going on continuously for millennia without a break, whether legally or illegally. But B, I get the fear. Y'all, I get the fear. I have two people who I'm very close to, who, when they were younger, I'm not going to mention their names, but when they were younger, they were a hair's breadth from being trafficked, just a hair's breadth, through really, horrific means of kind of luring them into a particular situation when they were young. So I know that it happens. I mean, like, when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, we were so close from never seeing them again. But I don't think it was a Hollywood ring that was bringing them in. It was just people being jackass people.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it right there. I think we as humans don't want to accept the fact that most of the time bad shit happens by people we know, people who are close to us, and just that people are genuine, can be shitheads. Like look at when there's molestation or rape. Like, most of the time it's someone in the family or someone close to the family. Same with child trafficking, and we don't want to accept. We'd rather think that it's some grand conspiracy by people we generally don't like, which is like, I mean, a lot of conservatives don't like Hollywood, and we don't want to accept the fact that people are shitty, but just on their own, like, bad shit happens. Like, there's not a grand conspiracy to do that, and we want that explanation in order to kind of. Well, one person made a great. I forget who it was. There was an article. I think it was on Medium, but it's almost like an RPG. It's a role playing game. It's like a video game that we want to be involved in some sort of uncovering of some grand thing and solving some great puzzle, rather than just looking at the world and saying a bunch of bad people like Epstein and people who do this kind of stuff are just shitty people.
The more money they have, the worse it can be.
People want to believe that they have access to some special knowledge, that they know something that other people don't, and that somehow makes them morally superior. And then there's this whole deep state cabal thing. Basically, what people want to believe is that, okay, government is just not operating on a surface. That there's some things that are going on that are leading us toward this one world government and this new world order and all of this other stuff. And honestly, listen, if there was going to be one world government, I think it would be pretty easy to facilitate. I mean, it's like if the European Union were to say, okay, we're going to take this model and we're going to export it to, say, India. And then maybe we'll export it to Africa, and we're going to replicate this model. We're going to develop these trade unions, or these unions of trading states, and organize this and basically bring everybody together. And I think that they could probably do that in a generation or two. I don't think that it would be particularly difficult. But the thing is that, we're Americans and we have to preserve our freedom. And at the end of the day, there is no real freedom. I mean, basically, we're all under the control. We're at the behest of corporations and all of this other stuff. And I'm not saying that from a conspiratorial standpoint. I mean, this is just the way shit works, right? But to say that there's some deep, dark cabal of evil people and they're working together to bring about the government of Satan and it's like, come on, y'all, miss me with that bullshit.
I think there's one more element, and I'm really curious what you all think about this, that feeds into the QAnon, and it's racism and also sexism, because the fear. I think I'm right here. I think the fear is that little white girls are going to be taken, violated, killed, and eaten. And it's when it's little white girls, their purity is going to be violated. Their purity that's not owned by them, but by
raped by big black men.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, the unconscious or conscious fear. So I think that's part of the racism. Yeah, and then the sexism is that it's like the girl's purity. It's when that's violated. It's again a continued obsession with that. Now, I don't think that any children should be violated ever, y'all. So don't get me
Hey,
wrong.
don't forget about feminism, Katie.
Right.
The fear that women might take over.
Right. Yeah. Right.
There you go. Now we have a problem.
Right. The feminist agenda right here, right now. Stopping child trafficking. But right, is that part of the QAnon though? It's like when little white girls are threatened, that's when people get riled up. That's when all the hashtags begin.
Hey, I just want to stop and say Katie Valentine for world president.
Oh God,
Yes,
no, God, that's campaign over.
The philosopher queen.
Oh my.
Well, I think
I'll run my platform next episode.
Honestly, that might be true about anything. Like people don't give a shit until white people are experiencing it. Like I mean, honestly, like it's a non-issue for people until white people are affected. I mean, but that might be for a different podcast. I don't know.
Damn, you went.
But it's when you hear about trafficking, it's always sex trafficking. Y'all, all trafficking is sex trafficking. Everyone who's trafficked is sexually vulnerable. Yeah. So like labor trafficking is also sex trafficking.
And I mentioned this when we were talking beforehand, but this was in the Huffington Post. It popped up in my news feed, and it says, no, the government did not break up a child sex trafficking ring in Georgia. This was something that happened last week, and all of the QAnon believers, the faithful, that they were all on this, and they say, hey, you want to talk about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but nobody's talking about this child sex trafficking ring that was broken up in Georgia. And then come to find out it was bullshit.
Well, and that's just the thing about this QAnon thing is it takes away from the actual bad shit that's going on in the world. And it just distracts us from the actual trafficking that's going on. But I wish we could keep this conversation going, but we're going to have to wrap it up sometime, but fear not, we have a website. So you can go to our website.
Whoa, hold on for a second. Poll, please.
Man, I need my chart to be filled out.
Well, I thought we were all in agreement. No, it's a no from me, dog.
No.
Fuck no.
No. Oh my gosh, this whole episode. It's a sea of no's on my chart in front of me.
Well, here's the deal though. If you are listening and you disagree with us, you can actually leave comments on our podcast episode. So you go to heretichappyhour.com. There is a way to comment on the episodes that we have, and check that out if you disagree with us. Also, if you want to get some Heretic Happy Hour merch, we also have that. We're not like Wayfair. We're not going to hide kids in things and ship it out to you. So don't worry, y'all.
So no $12,000 merch, right?
No. $20 something t-shirts, not $10,000 sweatshirts.
Well, y'all, the day that our podcast episode airs and the conspiracy theories in our Facebook groups, I always put a poll before you listen, who's going to believe what. So you've already heard this one, but we have one more to go. So come on over to Heresy After Hours. You can participate in the poll for our final installment of the conspiracy theories. We got a lot of heretics over there. People talk about really fun things. Come and join the conversation. It is open for everyone. Heresy After Hours. And we also have a Facebook group that is exclusive for our patrons. And they ask the really tough questions. We love to interact and talk with our patrons in that group. So if you become a patron, you will have exclusive access to that one too.
And yes, did someone say Patreon? Yes, I believe we did. And we do have a Patreon page. And that is where if you cannot get enough of the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, and who can, really, I mean, it's almost impossible. You can get bonus episodes, bonus interviews, so much cool stuff. We're even adding now a new level where I think at the $25 level, each of us is going to take a week and record one like video, basically a bonus video every week for people at the $25 level and above, just to riff on different things, talk about stuff we didn't get to talk about on the podcast. And that's all yours at that level. But we've actually changed up some of our levels a little bit on Patreon. So go check it out, patreon.com/Heretic Happy Hour. Support us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we are loading that thing up with so much cool stuff. You'll be so glad you did.
Yes. And if you enjoy this podcast, we highly encourage you to like, subscribe, share, and most of all, rate us. give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Because if you don't, there is 5G technology that is tracking you, and we're watching you. We got eyes on you, pal. Rate this podcast 5 stars, damn it.
Watch out.
5G coming near you.
Coming for you.